has to go, and you are on time. So if you guys are on time, and Lisa is joining us from South Africa, let's take advantage. Um, why don't we just, even though you guys, oh, good. Here's Frank. Hi, Frank.
Hey Ben, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Just got home from class.
Great. We are actually just about to start right now, and I was going to ask, even though you all know each other in one way or other, I'm really happy we have Lisa Lott joining us, and she's one of our Zanzibar alums from a few years ago. So just to get things started, I wanted to ask each one of you to introduce yourselves to the group and say where you're from, where you go to school, what you did in the country where you served, and let's start off by talking about one thing that we miss about our host community. And why don't we just go down the line, start with Sammy and Christina, and then, all the way across.
Right on. So my name is Christina, and we're both at McDaniel College, and I'm from New Jersey. I forget what one of the other preliminary things was. I don't know.
Where you went?
Okay. Yeah, I was in Zanzibar. I went to Zanzibar, and I was teaching. I was teaching biology, and excuse me. I was teaching about 4 biology classes and 1 English class in a secondary school, and so I had about just under 200 students. What's one of the things I miss? I think I really miss, it sounds funny, but I miss stoop chillin'. And that means in Zanzibar, in Stonetown, like, so many people are outside and, like, watching the kids play and just, like, talking and interacting when they have a little bit of time between work. And I used to just love going and introducing myself and just kind of taking a seat and, like, chatting with people. I learned so many interesting things that I would have never had a chance to do. So that's what I miss.
Great. Thanks, Christina.
Okay, my name is Sammy, and I'm at McDaniel College as well. I'm originally from Seattle, and I was in Morocco this summer for 2 months, and originally I was supposed to be working in, like, social media and, like, making videos for an NGO that, like, worked with women's empowerment and, like, empowered women and youth through entrepreneurship. And they were, like, doing their final project, and I was supposed to help them, like, complete it so that they could present it. And but I did that, and I also worked in, like, a rural village teaching French. But at the NGO, I ended up teaching English mostly to a community class. And what do I miss? I don't know. I kind of just miss it all. Morocco's nuts. So I miss the dry heat. I miss the tagine. I miss the people, because the people are so cool, and I love walking around somewhere and not entirely knowing what everyone is saying. I miss that. Yeah.
Very nice. Lisa Lott, could you go ahead?
Hi everyone. My name is Lisa Lott. I'm originally from the Netherlands, but I move around every couple of years, mostly around America. So I was a ambassador in Zanzibar. I was teaching chemistry in secondary school, and I also did an English club. What I miss, and then I graduated from Georgetown in May, and am now a Princeton Africa Fellow in Cape Town, South Africa. And what I miss most, so the summer after I went to Zanzibar, I actually lived in Dar. So I lived in Dar last year for 6 months. And so I feel like I've actually spent more time in Africa the last couple of years than in America. So I've been really lucky. I've been able to go back to Zanzibar twice. And so I feel like I'm very connected to it. And yeah, I miss the everyday life. I miss the food, but I got to have that in Tanzania, which is nice. I miss living by the beach, but most of all, I miss the kids. I miss being with them all the time, and also just have an impact on someone's life directly. And especially now that I'm working in an organization more from the top, seeing it on the ground is something I miss.
Very nice. And Lisa, thanks again for joining. I love it, this aspect of it, to not just hear what our fresh alumni have to say, but just hearing what people are doing and how they reflect on the experience a few years later. And at a certain point, we realized that's so valuable for new alumni to hear about as well. So really appreciate you taking the time to join the webinar. Layla, do you want to go ahead?
Oh yeah. Hi, I'm Layla. I live in New Jersey, and I go to the College of New Jersey. And for this past summer, I was in Zanzibar, and I worked at the Forum for African Women Educationalists, or FAWE. And for something that I miss, well, I really miss all of the people and the relationships that I had. I really loved my boss, and it's something similar to what Christina said, just that community feel of like just everyone, like the same people, just always like out on the streets and just hanging out and just like kind of just like having fun and like walking to work in the mornings and passing the same people all the time, like, and seeing all those same faces and like having those conversations and stuff is something that like I really miss. Like all those people that we got to meet, I miss them.
Nice. Frank, your turn.
Yep, so my name's Frank, everyone. I was also in Zanzibar with Layla and Christina. I am at Ohio State. This is my senior year there. And I was in Zanzibar. I worked with 2 different secondary schools there. It was kind of interesting. I worked with one public government school, and then one that was a private Christian school. So interesting kind of seeing the contrast. And then I taught English at both those schools. And I think what I miss the most, definitely just our squad there, Layla, Christina, Kate, and then Kathleen. Really miss that, and just all the good times we had in our apartment and hanging out together. And then also I've been, because I had studied Swahili before we left, so it was something that was really special for me, getting to be in a spot where, I mean, every single person speaks fluent Swahili, and just getting be immersed there and get to go around the streets and practice my Swahili and speak with people that now being back in the U.S. and only having like my teacher and 2 other students to talk to in Swahili, definitely something I miss a little bit of, not just being able to casually try and converse whenever I wanted to.
Very nice. And how are you feeling, Frank?
Oh, I'm feeling good. Yeah, for those of you who weren't with me, I got typhoid fever at the end of our trip, but feeling good now. Went to the hospital there, got really good care. Got some medicine, and I've been feeling, for the past week, I've been feeling good. Still a little tired, still not, like my energy's not fully back, but no more signs of like the sickness.
Good for you, man. You're a trooper. You're back at school a week after typhoid. Yeah.
We really started a trend, my group, with all the sickness. We had typhoid as well, and we had the sickness we still don't know what it is to this day. So, wow.
I tell you, it's a really Zanzibar-heavy group, and you guys all understand like there's this amazing plus side of the ledger for Zanzibar in terms of going there and the impact that you can have and the people you meet and the magical world that you're introduced to. And then there's this minus side of the ledger where it just seems inevitable that typhoid is a bit severe, but that the possibilities for getting sick there are just too high. And that's life in the developing world at that level. But it's a constant assessment every year. Is like, gosh, are we going to do this or not? And we saw they've opened up a new hospital since you were there, which is a little bit better than Dr. Omar's clinic, fortunately, which is part of our calculation as well.
Yeah, because we never really figured out what Mari had, which is kind of crazy.
Right. In Lisa Lot's year, I think 4 out of 7 or 5 out of 7 took turns, having some element of, I don't know what. Some of it was just basic stomach stuff, but there was Tomoko had typhoid as well. Anyway.
Yeah, but she didn't tell me, but anyway.
Right, so let's move on from that, and let's talk about coming home and the messages that you want to convey. I purposely asked you guys what it is that you miss about Zanzibar or Morocco, in order to begin filtering in terms of, what is it that people have to know about your experience, whether it's a close friend or family member that you're having a conversation with, or whether you're standing in front of a room of people who may or may not be interested in anything that you have to say. And how is it that you craft a message? And one of the key things in crafting a message is knowing your target audience for sure. But then another part of crafting a message is really knowing what is it that you want for people to know. What's the most important thing, no matter how much you dress it up at the beginning, that's your message, your core of what you want to share with people about the experience. That you've just come off of these experiences of being unofficial ambassadors from McDaniel or from New Jersey or Ohio State or Washington or wherever it is that you're from or whatever it was that you're representing, to all these different people in Zanzibar and Morocco. And now you've entered a new phase of this experience, and this phase goes on for the rest of your life in terms of being an unofficial ambassador and what it is that you're going to do to build off of this experience. And so as you're having these conversations with people that you're back home, if I was stuck in an elevator with you for a minute or 2 minutes, what is it that if you push it all away that you want for me or that other group of people stuck in the elevator to know about the country, about the Muslim world, about the specific experience? And Lisa, I'm going to ask these 4 guys to get the ball rolling a little bit and talk about this, another couple questions, and then I'm going to pull you in to get your reflection on these things a few years later. So out of our new group of alums, who'd like to go first as far as, what's that core message that you want for people to know?
I could go.
Okay, go for it.
So I think a message that I really wanted to convey was something that I had written about in my first blog post, and it's just kind of like working at Fawway has really shown me that these women and that these boys and girls from these marginalized communities, that these are the people who really know how to make a difference in their communities, and these are the people that we need to invest in. And that, like, it's really easy to assume that, like, coming from like where we are with all of our resources and everything that we have at our disposal, that it's easy to assume that, like, one, that maybe like they're kind of like helpless, like in some respects, and also to assume that like anything and everything we do can help these people. But really, like talking to like a lot of these like young students, like these young people especially, that I realized how just globally aware they were. Like so many students I knew that I talked to and interviewed, wanted to learn English because they wanted to move forward in the world, or they wanted to become a doctor because they knew that, a lot of the health facilities in Zanzibar weren't at their best capacity. And I had done some research. I had given out a survey that Frank and Christina actually gave out in their schools, and one of the questions on the survey was like, oh, are you interested in helping people, and like, and how so? And every single student had responded that they wanted to help other people and that they wanted to help build their communities. And so like I think I just wanted to bring more exposure to the fact that like it isn't always necessarily about like what we could do for them, but rather what we could do to empower and enable them to use what they had already learned firsthand about their communities to kind of like just pursue that.
That's great. Do others want to go before I make a couple comments?
Yeah, can I just add something? It's very closely related. I think if I had a little bit, I'm thinking I have like an elevator message that I would say, but this is sort of the one that's a little bit more in depth. That it was an exchange. It really was an exchange. I had someone say, I was like, yeah, I was teaching, I was doing these things. They're like, wow, that's so great that you were doing that for them. And it kind of bothered me. They were just saying like, that's great that you did it, but I sort of was like, yeah, but I learned so much, and I wanted to make that very clear that I learned an incredible amount, as well as like exchanging what I could of my own knowledge. And I think that is an important thing. That's not necessarily about Zanzibar itself, but more the idea of traveling. And I think this kind of relates to like some of the TCNJ conversations about going different countries. What's the goal? What's your intent? And I think that is really important. That I want everyone to know that it was an exchange. Like I got an incredible amount out of it too.
Yeah, and then I guess I would, from the Zanzibar side of it, definitely what Layla and Christina said really rings true. And I guess the one thing for me, what talked about a little bit with people, and something that I find valuable and wanting to talk with people about, is for so many Americans that we have really kind of a one-mind view of what Africa is in all of its sense. And maybe that we were just in one very, very tiny section, not even just one part of one large country in Africa. But not even with that, though, that can talk about, like, well, it's not, or it's not even are your stereotypes incorrect, but that, there's so much diversity and difference to it. And it's like the ideas that you have about Africa probably don't hold at all true for Zanzibar. And so kind of like talking about that aspect too, of not just the misconceptions about Muslims, but then also really importantly the misconceptions about this massive continent of our world, and the way people think about it.
Very nice. Sammy, did you want to add something?
I think that the biggest thing that I pulled away that I want people to know, especially Americans, is they don't realize their position in the world. Like, going in as an American, I was like, yeah, we're a power player in politics and that sort of thing, but you don't realize, I didn't realize that people were invested in American politics and knowing about it and asking me about current politics, and as an American, I represented America, and you don't realize, kind of what Frank was saying, is there's misconceptions about Africa, and there's misconceptions about America too, and I don't know, I've just the entire time I was there, just perpetually fascinated by just the amount of misconceptions that were going both ways, and that we both have so much to learn from each other, but people just aren't aware that they need to learn from each other.
Okay, so that was wonderful, in my opinion. I from what I heard from the four of you, I was able to pull out several really big messages that I would, distill down to each of us has the capacity to make a difference, and that goes into the two-way exchange piece, that it's not just I went there and volunteered and made a difference, but Layla's point about students there who want to make a difference and who have given the same opportunities, perhaps would come and volunteer in an inner city in the United States and try and do something to make a difference. And so this idea that each of us can be a change agent, and that each of us may want to be a change agent. I also just heard from Sammy this idea of we have a lot to learn, and that we need to check our arrogance as it's positioned towards overseas, and that's even compounded more by the impact that America has in terms of our footprint in the world. I also heard from a couple of you guys a combination of Frank's point about Africa, and that people share common values and challenges, and while there's a notion to want to stereotype everything together, and that's one aspect of people being the same and sharing those challenges, there's also this idea of the universality of our lives and the different things that run through them together, whether it's sitting on the stoop, whether it's the challenges that a student might face. And then this other point, briefly touched on by Frank, but Sammy's written about this extensively in her blog as well, so I can bring this together, is this idea that Muslims aren't evil, and it's not sort of monolithic threat from Muslims, but that you guys can speak to that shared humanity. And so you've got these overarching messages that each of you may identify with one more than the other, but I want to challenge you a little bit on these messages, that it's really quite easy to come back from an experience like this and say, and to be really strident, and to say, no, we're all the same, or you just don't understand that, how emotional this experience was, because I met these kids and we all want to make a difference. And the next level of actually being convincing and being a change agent on your campuses or in your hometown communities is actually assembling the evidence that supports that assertion. And when you're in a discussion like this, you don't have to start with your topic statement. You can start with a story or an anecdote. And a number of you, I've been working with you on your blog posts, have had this mantra of show me, don't tell me. And it's the exact same thing with this. Is what's the evidence to back up your point? Layla, let's start with you. That's awesome that you distributed a survey and to Frank and Christina's students and they answered them. But what did you get? And that's just incredible, by the way, that you did that and you thought to do that and you gathered that primary evidence. But so what is that evidence? Like, what's an example from one of those surveys or some of those surveys that supports your point that the students of Zanzibar want to create change as well?
Well, something that I saw that was interesting between the two schools was that in, I think it was Christina's school, where one of my questions was like, oh, what kind of activities or clubs are you more interested in joining, and like I had like arts, I had like athletics, academics, and like leadership and community building type activities. And for Frank's school, a lot of them, most students put that they wanted leadership and community type activities, but in Christina's school, that was the one that was students were least interested in. And I was like wondering what the difference was, like how could that be so different between these two schools? And I saw that in Frank's school, in Christina's school, more students felt like more things needed to be improved on in that school. Like they were like almost all students thought every single thing, like resources, teachers, student relations, academic opportunities offered at the school, they thought they were all like unsatisfactory, more so than the students at Frank's school. So I just feel like from that, what I gauged from that was that I feel like students who are feel like they're receiving more out of their community want to give back to it more. So I think that like these students, but they're still even these students weren't interested in these leadership and community activities. They were still interested in helping people, and they still wanted to go into the community. They still wanted to build up their community and stuff. And I just feel like they feel like the more that they give into the community, the more they're going to get out of it. So I think that's just what I thought.
So the challenge is to take that. Layla, would you mind muting, because I think I'm getting an echo?
Yeah.
The challenge is to take that process, to take that finding, and to just jump to the conclusion on it. In terms of, I surveyed 3 public schools, or 2 public schools and a private school in Zanzibar, and found that X number of students, or a certain number of students, a majority of students, wanted to do, X, Y, and Z. And nobody else has that data. Nobody else did that. You guys are all in this position of you live this experience. And you were there, you took the pictures, you met the people, you lived the life day in and day out. And so as you get into discussions that could be very friendly discussions with people who want to hear your opinion, or it could be discussions where people want to challenge you, you've got to access those anecdotes or those stories to prove your point. Like Frank, if we were to go to you and to talk about the diversity of Africa and different places and different cultures, how is it that you could use your language skills as an asset in making that point that, I walked around and spoke with 6 different people a day about what their different hobbies were, or their professional interests, and this is what I found. Like what's an anecdote that you can tell along those lines?
Yeah, one anecdote on it, maybe something that's a little bit different that I've just kind of thought about. One experience I had was one with, I don't know, maybe this kind of belief. I feel like a lot of people think that when Americans, that whenever we go abroad to Africa, it's because they can't do any better for themselves, and that's we're so much more skilled or qualified to work in these certain positions that it's something that they can't do. And this experience I had on one of my first days, where this older teacher, who was kind of like a grump, and a very smart, very well educated guy, really kind of challenged me. I was like, why are you qualified to be here to be teaching our students? And over like the course of my time there, that it kind of like proved to him that I had the proper qualifications to be trying to teach his students English. And so there's kind of sense that, I mean, like, these aren't, it's not like the teachers and the students here are just like, oh my gosh, like an American teacher, like, you're perfect. But that just the same in the US, if a new teacher showed up, that we would want to hold them to high standards to make sure they were teaching our kids in a very like professional and well-informed setting, that this teacher was doing the exact same thing of, hey, just because you're an American, that doesn't mean anything. Like, I want to make sure that you're just as qualified to be teaching these students as any other teacher, Zanzibari or wherever else in the world they might be.
Yeah, great example, and also a really good segue to get to this question of impact. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the term voluntourism, and this sort of idea of, I'm going to go somewhere, hug some kids in a village, take some pictures, put them on my social media, and feel good about myself afterwards. And obviously, we try to set up our program so that we're not a volunteerist program, but that you have a scope of work and you're feeding into the actual work and needs as the leadership in our host communities define them, and as you're able to provide. And so in some of the different conversations you might have with people or in presentations that you give, you can run into contentious finger pointing or challenging questions of, all right, what do you really know? You were there for 5 or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it may be. You came in, you got out, you weren't there for a year or 2 years. What did you actually accomplish? What was your impact? And Frank, I like that you raised this with your example of somebody there asking you that question. And I want for each of you to be prepared to answer that question in a credible way. And when I say credible, your impact could be in the lines of some of the different human development challenges that we've talked about and that we work on, or it could be from a citizen diplomacy perspective of being a face to a group of people and a personality and a relationship that they never would have had otherwise. So I guess, Sammy and Christina, if we were to start with the two of you, how would you characterize the impact that you had? Not the one that you wanted to have or that you maybe dreamed up before you left, but the one that you actually did have in Zanzibar and Morocco, respectively.
You can go. Okay, all right, I'll go then. Okay. So the impact that I had, is that what you're asking? Okay, so I think the impact I had was definitely more of a citizen diplomacy perspective, I think, because personally I didn't feel particularly effective as a teacher. I'm not a good teacher. That's what I found out. And but I did find out that I'm really good at talking to people, and my students, I had a particular group of students who wanted extra English practice, and they just wanted a discussion every day, just to talk to me and to practice. And from that, these are older men who are active in their communities, and they had serious misconceptions about Americans, and I had serious misconceptions about Moroccans, and I feel I had a strong impact in being able to not correct them, but redirect their thinking and open their minds up to this is who I am, this is my culture, and vice versa. They were able to open up my perspectives. We had this serious conversation about protesting and the differences in our cultures in protesting. They asked me, what do you do in protests? And I'm well, in America you don't really protest, you kind of just post on social media, and people don't really you don't really go out you don't take to the streets. Whereas they were telling me in Morocco there was this guy who starved himself for 40 days because he disagreed with the government, and and there was another person who set themselves on fire, and there were drastically different forms of protesting, and it hadn't really occurred to them that they could protest on social media because it's like the government is watching their social media, and so it was something totally new to them. And so it was like things like that. Like I feel like I really made an impact, and I was able to like open their minds up to like a different way of thinking because of like my presence there and like the conversations I had. And like in other ways, like, you know, there's like younger children who had like perhaps never met an American before, or like, you know, gotten to speak in English or anything like that. And so it's just like having a positive impact with like the children that way, like leaves a lasting positive impact for life, so that they're not like, and it's like, you know, it's like, and like part of the program is you don't give them anything except for like, you know, you're talking and you're giving them your time. And so I think that that was a really crucial aspect too, because there were kids who like asked like, oh, can you get this for me? Oh, I need this, I need medicine. It's like, I can't give that to you. I can redirect you to help, but like I can't give that to you personally. And so it's like, and like with that, I was like, I feel like I was able to teach them to be resourceful as opposed to just asking for things. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that my impact in country, as well as here, it's kind of played an interesting role in both places, was I think, I don't know if I was always effective, but I really tried to create safe places. When I say that, with my students, we spent a lot of time talking about that, talking about respect, and talking about, I told them, I was like, you can ask me anything that you think that you need to know that I might have a opinion on or thought on, like, please ask. And instead of just telling them that, I also, like, I made them do it. In the beginning of the class, the first day, I had them write questions to me, and then I took all the questions and put them in a bag, and at the beginning of every class, we would take 5 minutes. They would pick 3 questions, and I would answer them, and then I would ask them. So we really, like, by the end of it, would be raising their hand, being like, wait, I have another one, like, can we spend another minute, and, like, you can answer this. So that was like one example, like right in the classroom. But I also think about that in the U.S. I use my uncle a lot to gauge. He's a challenger. He has a lot of very stereotypical views of the Muslim world and of Africa and of other places in the world. So he's someone that is a good person for me to practice having those conversations with someone who disagrees with a lot of things about me traveling and so on and so forth. But so I said to him one day, he said, you know, what'd you learn, da-da-da, and I said, you know, one day I had a conversation with a teacher about discipline, and the teacher in country, he really, you know, he said, I know you don't, we were talking about corporal punishment, I know you don't like that, but what do you think is another option? And we really chatted for quite a while about, you know, how I grew up and different ideas that I have and a different perspective rather than punishment, use a more positive, like, for a good while, I mean, a whole class period, we talked about that. And I saw my uncle, like, his face just completely change. He was blown away that we had that conversation. He was like, he actually listened to you while you were speaking? And I was like, yeah, like we had a conversation. Like, we didn't agree on everything, but he was asking questions, and so was I. I mean, we were disagreeing, but also bouncing ideas off of each other, and that was pivotal. I think that for people to hear that's possible. Like, yes, there's, you know, cultural differences, and there's definitely different ideas, and, you know, many things, and not everything, but that having those conversations and learning and, you know, finding an efficient way to question things, not in a way like, this is wrong, don't do it, but like, oh, like, why is that the way that this is, was possible. And I think that's been like a powerful way to help people understand my experience and impact while I was in country.
Very good. Frank and Layla, I want you to think about the answers to that question of impact, but actually, Lisa, I want to bring you in and ask that same question of you. And you now have the benefit of a couple years of hindsight here, and you've done, you know, some fantastic things since you were in Zanzibar. What sticks with you in terms of what was the impact that you had as a volunteer that summer? You were at Fort Donny School, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, first of all, I just want to say it's so interesting to hear this because, like, hear their answers because it just takes me back to 2 years ago because we have a lot of the same discussions. I mean, Ben, there a lot of the same things, and it's these key words that keep coming up. Empowerment, feeling like it was an exchange. I like that word. Things like that, and I think when we had our talk, afterwards, like this, I think I don't think I had a good perspective of what had just happened to me. I think even today, I think what happened, what I went through in Zanzibar still affects me today. And I think when you take a year out of it, 2 years out of it, you get even more perspective of the things that change you that you didn't realize before, especially as you start classes again. I don't know I studied public health, so like having the personal stories and then having the studies that we do and everything combined really affected me. And I think for me it was it was such a transformative experience for me because it was my first time in the developing world, and I wouldn't be sitting here in South Africa if it wasn't for that experience. And I think it's the students that changed me the most. And like you said, like I didn't have an experience as a teacher. I definitely didn't have experience. I wasn't supposed to be a chemistry teacher. That was kind of a last minute thing. And so, Mari, the other girl that was in my school with me, we still have these discussions about what happened to us. And I actually, this summer, I went on a trip with her to Malaysia and Singapore because she was in Hong Kong teaching there. And I think for the 7 of us that was there, we are still so bonded by this experience. And all of us, Deborah, another girl, she was working at an NGO there, and she was in Arusha. What was that program called again? I forgot. The State Department program?
Yeah, she got a Boren scholarship.
Yeah, Boren, right.
Yeah, so she went back. Yeah.
Right, and so when I was in Tanzania, so I was working for the National Institute for Medical Research in Dar, and so when I was there, Fiona, another girl that was with us, she was studying abroad there, and then Deborah was there, and it's just such an incredible experience that it affected us so much that we all wanted to come back like a year later. But it's the personal stories that I think really touched me the most because you put a face to the stories and you listen and you ask them, well, what do you want out of me, not what do I want out of you, So there's just still stories that I tell to this day, and the hardest thing for me is putting into words to the people that I talk to about my experience, and I think the best way to do that is not share my story, but share my student's story. For me, that was way more profound than me telling, hey, this is what I thought about it, because it wasn't so much about what I thought of it, it's what the person you're talking to thinks about it, and so just being that person that tells someone else's story, I think is more powerful than because it's hard to put into words what everything meant to you. And so I think when you share the stories, you put faces to it. I think that's a lot more powerful than anything.
Yeah, I agree. And a couple other things I wanted to ask you about, Lisa. When we go to a new country, it's pretty natural that we think of asking somebody who's been there, who's lived there, what's it like, what should I bring, what should I expect. I wanted to ask you the opposite, though, as far as these guys are all re-entering, and you've come back so close to the start of your school years that I can't imagine you had a lot of time to really process and decompress. So, Lisa, for these guys that are just coming home right now, if you were just coming home afresh, what would you want to know, or what advice do you have in terms of getting back into the swing of things and having good conversations with people about the people who you met and the experiences that they had?
I remember when I came back, I came back on the 4th of July, which was really tough. And so I had that, the culture shock coming back that I didn't expect. And to tell you the truth, I can't tell you the best way to deal with it because I didn't know how to deal with everything that happened. For me, like I said, it was just sharing the stories, and because I couldn't put into words what I was feeling, and so I let the stories do the talking. But it's also hard. Some people don't want to hear the stories, hear kind of what happened, or it's hard to put it. Like what do they want out of me in terms of my experience. And so I think the best thing for me was when I actually coming back to school, because I had a month at home and I was kind of like, okay, like how do I experience? I didn't really. I live in Louisiana, and that's a tough place to live sometimes. And so I would come back to DC. I think it's a lot more open, especially in my group of public health majors, and being able to talk about all the things we went through in a public health sphere and relating and putting stories to the things we're reading in the textbook was my way of kind of dealing with it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't think this is a great answer to that question, to be honest.
Well, don't be so hard on yourself. I mean, I think it's helpful. Let's get to that point. Christina was talking about that a little bit with her example of her uncle and this idea of having tough conversations and effective tactics to having tough conversations. Could maybe Frank, if we can start with you this time, and have you found something to be particularly challenging in terms of conversations that you've had thus far, and have you found any successful ways of navigating those difficult conversations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so because I had to I started school so soon when I got back that I actually flew into Columbus. My family lives in Cincinnati, so I haven't even seen my family yet, and so I've really just been entirely in a college setting, which I think is definitely a little different than the way that I'm sure is what I'm going to encounter when I'll probably talk to extended family and different people. But I mean, I think one thing, even with with college kids, maybe a little bit, I don't know, just something of people just being like, oh, like Frank, like he's back from Africa, and just like, I don't know, it just seeming like really exotic, and people not really caring too much about where I was, but just like, oh, you were off, and I think even someone, or there's something where like they knew I was in Zanzibar, they're like, oh, you're back from Asia or something. So just the thing I feel like I've encountered the most is just like a lot of people just not really being too interested in like the specifics of where I was, and more just kind of this general sense of you went somewhere exotic that wasn't the U.S. or Europe, like that. Especially when like people are like, you got typhoid fever, and like that just kind of contributes to it more. So it's something that, and unfortunately in those, it's always just been kind of like in brief passings, like seeing someone casually on campus or like in a larger group. So I haven't been able to talk about it too much, but what I have enjoyed was that, I mean, my closer friends got to talk a lot about my trip in more depth, and kind of some of the thoughts I had, particularly with kind of like the role of language and talking about English and English's kind of role in the world and the way it's really kind of taken off, and maybe what that implies for a language like Swahili or wherever you might go in the world, with kind of what implications English might have, and definitely with some people maybe like having to talk about like living in a completely dominated Muslim area. But for the most part, I mean, with a lot of my friends here, it's something that it's been more of like either a sense of people being not interested at all, or being really interested but in a really open-minded sense. And I think since I haven't been able to be with like I'm sure when I like in a few coming weeks up at like the next big family gathering, then I'll probably have some more like interesting questions. But unfortunately, so far I don't really have anything to speak upon, because I really haven't run into any circumstances yet of kind of like difficult challenges of people being kind of like confused when I would say something about Zanzibar, like, wait, what? Like, they know English? So I haven't run into too many circumstances like that so far.
Well, I think one important thing that you spoke to there is knowing your audience and filtering out who are the people that want to have a polite conversation about what you do this summer versus the people who want to have an in-depth conversation about, and multiple conversations about your experience. And so you've got your elevator pitch for that first category, and then you've got the subject matter of your elevator pitch to explore, with that second category. And if you try to mix them, it usually doesn't go so well, because you just got to understand that there's such a large number of people out there who just don't care, unfortunately. But maybe if you have something really good in your elevator pitch that is meaningful, there's a certain percentage of people who don't care that you can convert to those who might be interested or might be supporters of something in the future, because they just don't know. So you don't want to be dismissive of them.
Yeah.
Christina and Sammy. Well, Christina, you already talked a little bit about talking with your uncle. Sammy, have you had any difficult conversations with people yet, or have you decided that you're not going to talk with anybody at all? Because I can see that happening. I'm just going out there on a limb, but.
Gosh, well, yeah, I literally just got back to the States like Friday. So far in the States, I haven't had any tough conversations, mostly because I've been hiding, so, like sleeping. So, while I was traveling afterwards, I didn't really have any tough conversations while I was traveling, because most people, like most backpackers, I feel, are pretty open people, and they're like pretty open to any conversation, and so I didn't really have any tough conversations. I had a really interesting conversation with a guy from South Africa. Like, he was like there fighting during the apartheid and all of this stuff, and so he was really interesting to talk to about like Africa in general, and he had like some strong feels about Muslims, but in general, okay, this wasn't like tough, but like I was at my conference and I met guys from Qatar, and so I had like the whole rehash of like Islam educational conversation all over again for an entire week. So that was actually really cool though, because it was like they have their like I was used to like the Moroccan perspective, but I met like the Qatar and like the Syrian and the Egyptian perspective of Islam too, and it was just like really fascinating. But no tough conversations. I'll talk to people though, I promise. So I won't hide forever. Yeah.
Lisa, I was at a presentation that you gave in Washington D.C. I guess it's worth asking, and you did a very good job. And not only did you do a good job, but your PowerPoint presentation went flying into the air at one point, so you had to basically do the presentation off the top of your head for part of it. Do you have any thoughts on what goes into setting up a good presentation or making a compelling case?
Oh wow, that I like totally forgot about that. It was at that poet place, wasn't it?
Yeah, Busboys and Poets.
Yeah. Anyway, well, one thing I still want to say about the last question, because I have to think about it a little bit more. There were 3 messages that were key to me. It was coming back from Africa. I think the major message that I try to spread in all the instances I've been here is the potential. Is the word potential, because everywhere I looked in Zanzibar, I saw the potential of people, I saw the potential of the place, I saw the potential of the community, and think that was a major message that I continue to try to emphasize. And also, if you are having trouble with how to talk to people and things, talk to the people that were with you. Sounds like y'all had a great group that was with you in Zanzibar, so talk among each other. I think that really helped us as well. I don't know if they still do this, Ben, but we went to a conference in Istanbul in October on minorities in the Muslim world, and 4 of us, 4 out of 7 went. And so I think that was a really cool turning point, because you could see, have these open discussions, and it was in an education setting, so that was really cool. And the answer to your question too, yeah, the presentation is just about like making it a story, so people are interested, keep interested in it. And then also, what I thought was helpful, which I didn't do in that presentation, but I did in following presentation, starting the presentation with asking like, what do you want to know? What is it that you have questions about? because and that's about knowing your audience, knowing, you know, what are they looking for in the presentation, what's going to keep them interested. If you're going to give them facts, if you're going to give them things that really don't appeal to them or they don't really like care about as much, it's tough to keep them engaged. But if you ask them, okay, what do you want to know before this, and then I wrote it on the board, the things that they wanted to know, the stories, and it was a public health class, so it was more in terms of public health, but I was able to, like, you know, keep my audience engaged. So I recommend doing that. That was really helpful, and it really got me excited in it too. I'm trying to think, there was another thing I wanted to say, but yeah.
Good. So let me offer two sets of closing thoughts on this. The first on the convincing communication, and Lisa just spoke to one of them, and the whole show me, don't tell me. But anytime that you can offer, you know, sympathetic, funny, sad, emotional stories that allow people to empathize with the subject that you're talking about, that's how you pull people in. It's not going to be by giving them a lecture on this is why Islam is not a religion of danger and evil, but rather talking about, you know, your students and how they invite you to their house and how you broke the fast with them, and et cetera, and demonstrating that point and the warmth through storytelling. That's huge. The second is that if you're trying to change somebody's mind about something, using your own personal prism as an avenue to make it okay to change. So, Sammy, I remember one of your blog posts was about how your perception of women in Morocco was pretty different pre-arrival to after you'd been there for like 20 hours or, you know, a week or whatever it had been. And if you were to begin a conversation with, these were some of the things that I thought about women in Morocco before I went there and taught and worked in this NGO. But after having had the experience of being there for a week and working alongside Fatima or Sana or whoever it may be, and then going to this one's house, my viewpoints began to evolve based upon what it was that I was seeing, what I was experiencing in these ways. And by signaling to either your small audience, your big audience, that evolution in thinking does not mean that you're stupid now and smart later, just that you're informed now and you were less informed before, and that you changed because of your experiences, it's an open door for them to change their perspectives as well. And then my favorite, and the third tactic that I always recommend is self-deprecating humor. You never want to make fun of the people who you're trying to tell people about, or like your host community, or like their clothes were so weird, or like I can't believe the tight pants that guy was wearing, or you want to start off by making fun of yourself and like, my God, you should have seen the first time I tried to put a hijab on and how difficult it was and this and that, and I just can't believe that people are able to do this every day in 30 seconds or less, and just like that. And as soon as you get your audience laughing at you rather than at yourself better, then all of a sudden, like, you're talking about something that's fun, you've loosened them up, and they're open, they're ready to be talked to about something, rather than like being a closed fist of like, oh my God, I'm at this talk on women in Islam, and you know they're so oppressed, and it changes the dynamic altogether. Those are some of the things I like to do. The other point I wanted to make with you about is what's next, and there's a reason why we started doing these. This was a Zanzibar heavy one, but the one we did last night, we actually had folks from all 4 different countries, and we're trying to build a broader network than just the 4 people or the 9 people who you were in country with in your specific place. Because the whole idea is that you guys have had this experience. This is also why we bring in alumni like Lisa a lot, is that you guys are connected in this way as well. You've had these experiences which, while unique, they're not really unique. I mean, that you've gone now and you've done volunteering and development in a developing country. You've had these different experiences building cross-cultural partnerships. Don't get me wrong, you guys are special. I think that this program is special, but there is this common ground for you to find with so many other people, whether they studied abroad in a certain country or whether they are working on Black Lives Matters on campus, at one of your universities, or they're doing Get Out the Vote activities for the fall because they want to protect our civil liberties in the United States and they don't want to see Donald Trump elected. There are so many strings that you guys have in common, and one of the things to realize as you are on your way to become these different agents of change is that it's hard, if not impossible, to do things by yourself. And that instead of looking to always be starting new things, look to join and become leaders in things that already exist, or look to bring a group together that wants to start something new together. Just because you love the kids in Tarmilat in Morocco doesn't mean that you can't apply that love as supporting Syrian refugees. Or, just because you had this incredible experience with kids in public schools in Zanzibar doesn't mean that you can't get involved in helping to get more anti-malarial nets to children in other parts of Africa. There are so many positive ways to apply what it is that you've learned that let's just not be so narrow on the specific country or community where I was. I mean, it's great if you want to, figure out different ways to support those folks, but Lieselott's a great example here in terms of taking what it is that she got out of teaching in a public school in Zanzibar and then spending time in Dar and now spending time in South Africa. And she also did work with people in Louisiana in between. And so, that's what my hope is in terms of how you guys apply this. And I think that there's a natural logic to how you get there. And I hope that you guys get there soon in terms of being in touch with each other, being parts of other networks, and bringing in pieces of all this to lead and create the change that you want to see. We're out of time. I will leave it there, and I want to just say I'm so happy. The three of you guys that just came back, each one of you individually. I hope you all feel better soon, or on the mends in terms of feeling better. But I'm really happy. It makes me quite proud. As the person who started this, that we're able to attract people like you guys to do this kind of service, and I'm really happy with what you guys were able to do over the summer. And Lieselott, I'm thrilled to see how your interests have evolved, and I appreciate you coming and sharing what you've been doing, and I think that there's a lot to learn from just the different things that you've been able to accomplish in just a couple of years. And I do remember being on the phone with you for your interview and sort of talking you into going to Zanzibar instead of Morocco, and it's pretty cool to see how a little left turn here or right turn there leads you to these different things. So thank you guys, and I'm happy to be in touch going forward on whatever it is that you guys want to be in touch on. That's it.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah. No, thank you, Ben. Yeah, thanks for all your work with everything. I mean, for all the, I guess, on the Zanzibar end, we didn't work, because we had Kathleen there, but thanks for all the help you did with everything, setting everything up. We had a great time. Really glad I got to be part of the program this summer. And everything, with you and Kathleen, for all the help you guys did with everything. So it was really a great time. I'm really glad I got to be a part of it.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Good.
And thank you, Lieselott, for
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, I just want to say one more thing. I'm going to write my email on here. If y'all have any questions about programs, about
Sweet.
Just use this experience in a positive way, even if that's promoting the program so others can join in. I know last year in Zanzibar, we only had 2 people come back, so that was tough to see after such a great experience. So use that and use each other. That's a big help. I'm still in contact with all the girls from my apartment. And one more thing, can y'all say what schools you were at? I'm just curious.
McDaniel College.
But no, I meant like in Zanzibar. Like what were you teaching?
I was teaching at Tumekuja, is the one like right on the water.
Yeah, we had a Japanese girl there, yeah.
And then I taught at Hamamni and then at St. Monica's.
Oh, okay. We didn't have anyone there. But yeah, no, that's really cool to hear. So Yeah, so please reach out because there's so many things you could talk about here, and I'm glad I